if it's just comfortable, that isn't living. If there's no pain, if there's no hurt, if there's no excitement, if there's no challenge, you're not alive, you're dead. I don't want to be dead. I want to live. A man by the name of Saint Irenaeus said this: the glory of God is man fully alive, and woman. He didn't write it that way, but it's true. It's found all throughout the Bible. I haven't got time to go into all of it, but read Romans 12. The glory of God is man living and woman living to the full potential for which they have been created. Thoreau said, most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to their grave with their song still in them. It's where I was headed. It's what was happening to me. My life, like all lives, have been a series of ups and downs. Now, I knew what it meant to follow this man called Jesus from the time I was little, but somehow I believed that I was missing out on the excitement of life. I grabbed for everything that I could get. I thought if I could make enough money, if I could have a big enough house, if I could be famous in Hollywood. And there was something dead inside. Benjamin Franklin said, most men die at 25 and aren't buried until they're 75. I want to live. I want to live. When my daughter was born, my first daughter was born, she was born blue, not breathing. You could say it was peaceful. There was no noise. But it was a horrifying moment. And the doctors rushed from everywhere, and they gave her oxygen, and they began rubbing her with towels, and then suddenly this scream burst loose, and her face turned beet red, and her arms began to fly in every direction, and we screamed the words, "She's alive. She is alive." I want to live. There's another great man who wrote something, a buddy of mine. His name is Paul, the Apostle Paul. This is what he wrote. I want to know Christ. Now listen to this. And the power of his resurrection. Those words right there have changed my life. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. He's not talking about keeling over someday and then someday being raised from the dead. He's talking about knowing the power of the resurrection, which is the most important belief that a Christian can possibly have. If you're not a believer or follower in Christ, you have a right to choose anything. In fact, you have a right to point at us and say we're stupid. And if Christ is not raised from the dead, we are fools. But if he is, and we choose to believe he is, then to know him and experience that kind of power in our life now is what life is all about. I felt a little of that coming down that hill. I felt a little of that when I jumped out of an airplane here in Denver, Colorado at 14,000 feet with my 18-year-old daughter. It was her birthday present. We had spent the entire day practicing. Pull this one first. If that doesn't work, pull this one. There's actually about 3 things you got to pull, and you guys have seen how my brain works. Oops, they're all gone. What a thrill. What a thrill that was. That same hill that you saw the sledding on, if you use YouTube, go on YouTube and look about Wild Sled Ride on our, you can find it on our website. because I went down that same hill by myself at 50 miles an hour, laying on my stomach with a camera taped to my head. I scared 2 horses to death. I scared myself to death. But I was alive. I'm not going to lay down and roll over and suddenly become some kind of a zombie. And as I've talked about that, I run into people all over the world and people who have responded to this little piece that I just wrote. I got a letter today, not a letter, an email today from a 47-year-old man who is suffering from the early onset of dementia. They give him 6 years. And that guy inspired me more than anything I've read in the last year. Because he is determined to live out his life. The words are misspelled, but he loves the humor that he's presenting to people. Those kind of people change lives. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you something. I had slipped into a coma. Physically, mentally, spiritually. I had gotten used to comfort and just kind of coasting along. This picture was taken 5 years ago at a beach in Destin, Florida. People on the beach are yelling, "Move, we want to see the ocean." I weighed 237, 240 pounds, and if that beautiful little child that I'm holding the hand of had gotten in trouble 100 yards from shore, I couldn't have got anywhere near her. I didn't know what had happened to me until I saw this picture. I cringe showing you this picture. Now, if some of you are fighting with this kind of thing in your life, I don't care what it looks like. I'm telling you that I was physically not taking care of who I was. And as a result, it was affecting the rest of my life. When you're standing on the beach like that, I laid down once, but environmental people came and tried to push me back in the water. You know, when you got little kids going, "Free Willy." This was a sign of life. This was a moment when I realized that I had to make a change. I had to make a change. And I determined that I was going to do something that we hate. It's called discipline. We think of discipline as this nasty old thing that destroys all the fun in our life, when the truth of the matter is discipline is what brings life. I grew up in Colorado. John Elway, still a favorite quarterback for me that ever walked the face of the earth. But he did not get there except for anything but the discipline to practice those basics. And when he had the basics down, when someone would throw him some weird curve or come through the line at him, he could move wherever he wanted to move because he had disciplined himself to do so. And I decided to do that physically with my life. Changed everything. It was the beginning of unbelievable changes for me. There was only one way I could force myself to keep on this. I signed up for a triathlon. Are you a triathlete? Not yet. Look at me. Sign up. Sign up for the one I did. Not that 100-mile thing where you swim in the ocean and die. No, not that. This isn't the Iron Man. This is more like styrofoam person. I don't care. It was a start. I aimed for it. This is the one where you get up, run to the bathroom, fill the tub, pull the plug, fight the current, that kind of thing. Go down into the basement, pump up a bike tire, go back to bed. It was shorter distances. Folks, when I first started running, I couldn't make it a mile. I called my wife and said, "You got to come and get me." When I first started biking, we live in Nashville, Tennessee. It's worse than Denver, Colorado, unless you're going right up over the mountains. It's just hill after hill after hill. First hill, couldn't make it up. 3 or 4 times I couldn't make it up. Finally, I made it almost all the way, got off and walked the rest of the way. And then one day, I made it. And then one day, I made it and went back down again and came back up again. And then one day, instead of riding just a couple of miles and calling Diane to say, please come and get me, I can't go any further, I was riding 25 and 30 and 35 miles and beginning to feel what God must have intended for my life. All my life, my parents said to me, your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, which basically meant don't smoke, drink, chew, or just don't do those things. How easy to just name a couple of things. If my body is a temple of God's Spirit, then I need to take care of it in every way that I possibly can. And I can't allow that to happen. Signed up for the triathlon. I came in second in the triathlon. In my age group. There were 2 guys in my age group. The truth is, I beat almost half of all of the people who entered the triathlon. But the important thing isn't that I beat anyone. The important thing is that I finished. And you know what the problem is? One of the problems is we get discouraged because immediately we start competing against one another. We look at someone else. You may even look at me and say, I could never do that. I could never reach the point that he has reached. I'm still no prize. Let me tell you, I still have 0 athletic ability. I have the hand-eye coordination of a carp. I don't know if you have carp here. I'm dead serious. Do you know what a carp is? It's a fish with stupid lips, with lips. You fall into a pool of carp, you will be hickied to death. Corey's going, what's wrong with that? This race we have, friends, doesn't have a winner's circle, just has a finish line. And the physical part was the beginning of changing my life. Something happened. I got off of half the medications I was on. My doctor told me, because I've suffered with this depression thing throughout my life, my doctor told me that there is more medical chemicals released in my body when I run for an hour a day than in any medicine. They can't put it in the medicine. It's illegal. It's absolutely illegal to put it in there. A friend of mine made me read a book called Younger Next Year. And the book proposes that if you exercise for an hour a day, about an hour a day, it can be 45 minutes to an hour. I don't remember the exact, doesn't matter. It's the discipline of doing it. If you will exercise at a aerobic heart level and then push yourself to where you can just about hardly stand it a couple of times during that time, it will change your life. In our culture at age 45, most people's quality of life begins to diminish. And most people in our culture spend the last 10 to 15 years of their life almost incapacitated for no other reason than we don't take care of ourselves. You say, wait, I came to this thing tonight. I thought I was going to get spiritual advice. This is spiritual advice. It really is. Because you can't be everything God created you to be if you don't take care of yourself. I can't stop talking about this part of it, and this isn't all I'm going to talk about, but I can't stop because it has been made such a profound change in my life. You say, I can't run a mile. Just get to the front door. No, I'm deadly serious. You don't have to run a mile. I run 5, 6, sometimes 10 miles, a couple of times, 2, 3 times a week, and alternate that with biking. I have no problem getting on the bike. I have no problem running. I have a problem getting out of bed. And if I can get out of bed and make it to the front door, it's over. And the same thing is true for our spiritual lives and the discipline of our spiritual lives. It isn't hard to read the Bible. It's hard to open it. Once you open it, you're on your way. It isn't hard. It's discipline. Discipline has changed my life. Confidence changed my life. A lot of you don't know this. In high school, you saw the picture of me in high school? I weighed 110, 115 pounds. You know what happens to a 110, 115-pound kid from a religious family in high school? Let me tell you, you get beat senseless. The schools today, I don't think are a lot different than the schools in our day, except in our day we handled it ourselves. I got beat up on the average of 2 or 3 times a week. It's like a school sport in our school. You could letter in it. I got so many signs slapped on my back that said, "Kick me." My mom finally just made a sweater with it in the back. I can laugh at this now, but at the time it wasn't funny. I just wanted someone to love me. That's all I wanted. I wanted somebody to care. Now, God created me with this idiotic brain and lips that won't stop. And I made a discovery. I discovered that if I could make people laugh, they couldn't hit me. That was the first way that I used it. But then I misused it. We were in class one day, and this beautiful English teacher, I loved English, I loved literature, couldn't tell anybody because that would bring on another beating. Because you were a sissy if you loved English, and if you loved literature, and if you loved music. I loved all of those things. And so she was doing Shakespeare, and there is a line in Shakespeare where they talk about getting a spot of blood off the toga. And she used a mild curse word in there. And I raised my hand and suggested 3 or 4 other adjectives that were not even close to mild that he might have used instead of that one. She made me stay after school. I sat in front of her desk. When you stayed after school at my school, you missed the bus. When you missed the bus, they called your parents. Your parents had to come and get you. And I don't know about today, but when I graduated from high school, they did not bring a lawyer. They brought a 2x4. They brought barbed wire, whatever it would take. You were in big trouble. And I knew that before I left, she would expel me. I knew it. Her name was Frances W. Peterson. I love this woman. She corrected papers, pulled the desk right up next to her desk so that she could keep her eye on me. And when she finished, I can still see her long, slender fingers cap that pen. And she said to me, "Kenneth Alpheus Davis." That's my full name. No one ever used my full name, but what disaster followed. Kenneth Alpheus Davis. And I thought, here it comes. And she said, "God has given you a marvelous gift." She said, "Now you're using it to destroy my class. You're going out for speech." I stood right up out of my chair. I said, "I'm not going out for speech. All my friends are wearing letter jackets that have macho symbols, hockey sticks, footballs. I will not walk around school with a set of lips hanging off of my jacket." Oh, she said, "You will go out for speech because the alternative is unthinkable for you." She made me go out for humorous interpretation. A woman who saw that this little boy had zero confidence and was using all that was at his fingertips in the wrong ways could have thrown all the dirt back on me, but she dug through the dirt and found the gold and held it up so that I could see it. I came back 10 years later, no longer weighed 112 pounds. I had lifted weights. I was at a class reunion. There were some boys I wanted to see one more time. It was unbelievable. Girls that wouldn't even look at me asked me to dance at the reunion. It was like I experienced this whole new rebirth thing. It was unbelievable. I still have pictures. Some of the classmates that I had already in 10 years completely destroyed their lives. And I was asked to speak at another commencement on a stage, not anything like this. It was built out of plywood at the end of a gymnasium, all creaky chairs filling the gymnasium. And I stood up to give my speech. Years before, a coach, a physical education teacher, had pointed his finger at me and said, "You'll never amount to anything," because I couldn't catch a football. As I started my speech, I looked up and he was there. And I delivered probably the most dynamic talk I've ever given in my life. Halfway through the speech, I looked back and saw Francis W. Peterson, sitting about halfway back on the left-hand side. When I got done with my speech, I said, "Thank you." I ended my speech. I said, "Thank you." And the place erupted in a standing ovation. Boys who had beat me senseless, clapping, applauding. I dared to look at the man who I'm sure had no idea how his words had hurt me. And he was applauding wildly. I don't think he even remembered. And then I looked over at Frances W. Peterson. She was not applauding. She had her hands folded under her chin. There were big tears running down her face. And I got this lump in my throat. Now, one thing that will cause you to shudder is to come from high school and then come back 10 years later and break into tears. I could not allow this to happen. So I went back to a chair they had at the back, and I sat on the chair. And they just kept applauding. And then a thought went through my mind. See, there's a fine line between confidence and unbridled pride. And this is the thought that went through my mind. I'm better than everybody here. I had performed with, people that most of these folks had never even seen except on television. I'm better than everybody here. You tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor? The second that thought hit my brain, the back legs of that chair slipped off the stage. I fell 6 feet to the ground. That brings a standing ovation to a dead stop. Some people saw me fall and they're going, "He's dead." Others had turned to a friend or blinked and they're going, where did he go? As I lay behind that stage, the deceiver himself pointed his bony finger at me and said, "You will never amount to anything. Everything you touch, you ruin." And I started laughing, and I have not stopped. Did God love me any less laying back there than he did when I was standing at the front? Did my family love me any less? Oh, they wanted to be somewhere else. There is no ceremonious way to climb back up on a 6.5-foot stage. Did you see me do this one just a little while ago? That's what I had to do. I just threw my leg up, rolled over, and stood up, and they gave me another standing ovation. And I went to the mic and I told them what I'm going to tell you tonight. I have had the privilege to perform for presidents. I have had the privilege to be with some wonderful folks who are in Hollywood. I have a radio show that's on 1,500 stations all across the country. None of that sustains me or gives me life. What gives me life is waking up every single day and knowing that the God that created the universe loves me, and he knows every bit of dirt about me. But he chose to hold up the goal. I went from doubt, self-doubt, and self-pity to confidence. We're making a movie on the 26th of this month that'll be released in theaters, very likely in a theater near here. It's called Fully Alive. And in that movie, I talk about some of the things I've told you about tonight. And in that movie, I talk about the fact that when it boils down to the lowest common denominator, the most important things in our life isn't the stuff we have. Ask the people in Japan. Ask the people in Japan who had multi-million-dollar homes, and today it's nothing but rubble. Ask them how fast it can go away. In fact, if you watch the news at all, you'll see that those people have some essence in their life that's amazing. because they care about family and the people they love. And in the bottom line, that and God's love for you, that's all that's left. I got a glimpse of that love. I got a glimpse of what real faith and living fully alive is all about a couple of summers ago, and it changed my life completely. You say, well, you said that your physical thing, it did. But God just kept opening up door after door. In order to tell you this story, I have to show you pictures of my grandchildren. What a pain. These are my 3 fairy granddaughters. Kylie, little JJ in the middle, and Lexi. I call them fairies because they are. Remember I told you I wouldn't lie to you? They have wings. Oh, I'm serious. I come into the room and I call out their name, and they come running from everywhere in the house, and their feet leave the ground, and they wrap skinny little arms around my neck, and they whisper in my ear words I was born to hear. I love you, Grandpa. But they're real kids, so then they always say something like, ew. What is that in your ear? And I tell them, that is a nativity scene. The ACLU is trying to get me to take that down. And your grandmother's on their side. I have 2 demon-possessed grandsons. Look at me. They are not demon-possessed. They are boys. And the word boy in Greek means possessed of demons. You can't tell me the same. I got him. Now, it doesn't mean that if a little girl is a little different or a boy, that doesn't mean that. But I'm telling you that they're just different. They're different. The little girls come in the house and go, oh, look at this, look at that. That is in the wrong place. Someone could stumble over that. So I put it right here, Grandpa, and then I will move this like this because it looks so much nicer. Don't you think so, good? Those 2 guys come in and go, hey, yeah! They clean up nice. You want to know the greatest thing that has ever happened to me? One of the greatest moments of my life happened about 2 months ago when I had the privilege to baptize those 2 boys. That oldest boy right there asked his dad one day, Daddy, where's my other grandpa? You cannot blame a child that age if you're him and I'm the only grandpa you got. You want to know if there's some options. His daddy said, your grandpa is in heaven. What is heaven? He's brilliant. I could tell you stories tonight, put you on the floor. His dad doesn't go pick him up anymore. His dad used to go pick him up at school, and one day he went. His dad travels as a singer, and he was so glad he could go pick him up. He went, and he said, how was Preston today? And the teacher said, well, Preston went to the bathroom, and then he took his underwear and his pants off. And he came out, and he would not put them back on. And the dad said, Preston. And the teacher said, I asked him why he did not want to put his pants back on. And he said, my dad never wears any pants. My son-in-law said to the teacher, I promise you I won't believe what he tells me about you if you promise me you won't believe what he tells you about me. Preston said, "What's heaven?" And his daddy told him. And Preston said, "How does the person go there?" And his daddy told him.